As a beat cop, I get calls to mediate disputes all the time. But the person who called 911 tonight was the department's own legendary Ice Queen, the captain who once took down a top 10 most wanted fugitive with her bare hands. She said her upstairs neighbor was making a racket. The second I got to her floor, she snapped a cuff on my wrist and locked me to her front door. "I'm the one making the noise," she said, her face a perfect mask of indifference. "You have two choices. 1. I report you for obstruction of justice and assaulting an officer right now. 2. You become my boyfriend and help me deal with my mother. Otherwise, I start screaming." My brain blue-screened. This woman was willing to frame herself, and me, just to get out a few blind dates. A week later, she picked the lock to my apartment, reeking of bourbon. In her left hand was my badge. In her right, a new set of keys. "I bought the condo next door," she announced. "Marriage, or a career-ending reprimand." 3. I snapped to attention and threw her a sharp salute. "Reporting for duty, Captain. I'm in." Our DMV photos would look great photoshopped together. We'd have that perfect couple glow. Dispatch to 1823. Report of a noise disturbance at the Embankment Lofts, apartment 1702. Proceed to the location. I hopped on my department-issued scooter, the night wind whipping at my face as I made my way over. When I knocked on the door of 1702, the woman who answered made my breath catch in my throat. Victoria Vance, captain of the CPD's Homicide Division, a legend in the department. She was wearing a simple black tracksuit, her hair thrown up in a messy bun. No makeup, but that famously icy face was still enough to make you forget how to speak. "Captain Vance? You called it in." I was completely lost. "Upstairs. 1802, she said, her words clipped. I nodded and turned to head for the stairs. I took one step before my wrist was seized. Click. Cold steel met my skin. I looked down. A gleaming pair of Smith & Wesson handcuffs connected my wrist to the handle of her apartment door. I was pinned, unable to move. "Captain, what the hell is this?" My mind was a blank slate. Was this some kind of freak on-the-job accident? Was I hallucinating? She leaned against the doorframe, watching me coolly. I made the noise. "What? Getting you up here was just a pretext." She pulled out her iPhone and waved it in my face. "Right now, you have two choices. 1. I call internal affairs and tell them you were obstructing my investigation and assaulted me. You can kiss this month's overtime pay and any chance of commendation next to your goodbye." I remembered the rumors about her, that she'd rather burn a dozen dirty cops than let one guilty man walk. A cold sweat broke out across my back. She wasn't bluffing. 2. You become my boyfriend. I was sure I'd misheard her. "You're what?" "Fake," she clarified, "to help me handle my mother's matchmaking." Before I could even process that bombshell, she delivered the final blow. "You can, of course, refuse. If you do, I'll start screaming assault. Say you force your way into my home. A decorated captain versus a beat cop. Who do you think they'll believe?" I was completely floored. This woman was willing to torpedo her own reputation just to dodge a few setups. My word against hers was a fly against a freight train. "Captain, let's just talk about this, okay? There's no need to." I tried to reason with her. "I'm only saying this once." She cut me off, her thumb hovering over the call button. The air felt thick enough to suffocate. I stared at her face, devoid of any warmth, and felt like a fish on a cutting board. 5 seconds later, I squeezed the words out through gritted teeth. "I'll take option 2. She lowered her phone and unlocked the cuffs. An angry red mark circled my wrist. She glanced at it, but said nothing. Inside, I followed her into the living room, feeling like I just signed my life away. She pulled a document from under the coffee table and tossed it to me. Relationship agreement. I read aloud. The terms were terrifyingly detailed. Everything from our public story to pre-planned date itineraries. It even noted that I liked cilantro and was allergic to shellfish. A chill went down my spine. "Captain, how do you know what I like to eat?" "Background check." Her tone was flat, impossible to read. But why would the captain of homicide need to run a full workup on a fake boyfriend's dietary preferences? I didn't dare ask. I picked up the pen and signed my name at the bottom. Leo Hayes. She took the agreement back, scanning it over. And I swear, for a fraction of a second, I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't her usual Arctic glare either. For a week after I signed the contract, Victoria Vance vanished. I started to wonder if the whole thing had been a stress-induced hallucination from working too many doubles. Then, on Friday night, I dragged my exhausted body home from my shift. I put my key in a lock and turned. It didn't budge. The door was already unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs as my hand instinctively went to the baton on my belt. "Who's in there?" I pushed the door open. The living room lights were on. A figure was sitting on my couch. It was Victoria. She traded her uniform for a black silk nightgown. Her long hair was down, and her legs were crossed, the fabric doing little to hide them. The air was thick with the smell of bourbon and the sharp, clean scent of her perfume. The sight was so jarring, I nearly called for backup. Captain, what are you doing in my apartment?" She didn't answer. Instead, she held up her left hand. She was holding my badge. Then, she raised her right hand, dangling a set of keys that jingled ominously. "I bought the condo next door." She stood up and walked toward me, the clicks of her heels on the hardwood floor echoing my own frantic heartbeat. She stopped right in front of me, looking down at me with an authority that had nothing to do with her rank. Marriage, or a reprimand that gets you fired and blacklisted from every precinct in the state? Her face was flushed from the alcohol, but her eyes were dangerously sharp. This wasn't a request. It was an order. My mind flashed with images of my career going up in flames, dismissal, public disgrace, my dream of being a cop turning to ash. 3. She began to count down. My heels clicked together. I snapped to attention, throwing her the most regulation-perfect salute of my life. "Reporting for duty, Captain. I'm in." My voice boomed, full of a desperate, manic energy. Our DMV photos would look great photoshopped together. We'd have that perfect couple glow. Victoria froze. Her countdown was broken. The wave of intimidation she'd been building now crashing into a wall of pure absurdity. A few seconds passed. Then she smiled. It was a tiny, fleeting thing, but it was like seeing a glacier crack for the first time in 1,000 years. The bourbon had made her unsteady. She swayed slightly, her hand landing on my shoulder to steady herself. Her touch was warm, burning through the thin fabric of my shirt. I went completely rigid. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. City Hall." She pulled her hand away, her voice returning to its cool, detached tone. "Bring your driver's license." With that, she took her new keys, turned, and walked into the apartment next door. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there, the ghost of her scent hanging in the air, my brain a complete mess. From fake boyfriend to husband in 1 week. This was moving faster than a high-speed chase. The next morning at 8, I stood in front of the mirror, my birth certificate clutched in my hand, feeling like an idiot on his way to the gallows. But I went. Victoria was already waiting for me outside the courthouse. She was in a simple white blouse and jeans, no makeup. She looked better than anyone I'd ever seen. She saw me and gave a curt nod. "You have your ID?" "Yeah." The whole process was a blur. Filling out forms, signing our names, giving thumbprints. When it was time for the photo, the clerk sighed. "Could you two move a little closer?" And groom, try to smile. I managed a pained grimace that was probably more terrifying than a frown. Victoria's body was ramrod straight, showing no intention of moving an inch. Taking a breath, I shuffled closer until my shoulder brushed against hers. She flinched, a barely perceptible tremor. I glanced over and saw the tips of her ears had turned bright red. Click! The camera captured the moment. Holding the marriage certificate in my hand still felt like a dream. As we walked out of City Hall, Victoria tossed me a set of keys. Not for her new condo. For hers. "You're living with me now." "What?" I sputtered. "Why? I thought we were—" "Married couples don't live separately." "What do you want my mother to think?" She shot back with a cold glare. I shut my mouth. "And so I moved." Her apartment was huge, decorated in minimalist black, white, and gray. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end furniture showroom. There was no warmth, no sign of a life lived. She pointed to a guest room next to the master bedroom. "Your room." Then she walked in her bedroom and shut the door with a decisive click. I stared at the closed door, feeling like it was a physical representation of the wall between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the living room. The door to her study was ajar. On autopilot, I walked inside. An entire wall was lined with bookshelves filled with texts on criminal investigation and forensic psychology. In the corner of her desk, I saw a small locked wooden box. It was old, the edges worn smooth from handling, but there were fresh scratches on it, too, as if someone held it often. What kind of secrets would a homicide captain keep? Case files. Something else. My curiosity was officially piqued. On Saturday morning, the sound of the master bedroom door opening jolted me awake. Victoria was in workout clothes, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. She'd clearly been for a run. 10 minutes. Get dressed, she ordered. Where are we going? To meet my parents. My stomach dropped. So soon? She pulled a few shopping bags onto the sofa and dumped out their contents. Wear this. It was a collection of business casual clothes I would never buy for myself. The price tags were still on. Dressed like a doll, I followed her to the car. The drive was tense. Halfway there, she handed me a tablet. Read this. I took it. On the screen was a document titled, Leo Hayes Engagement Strategy V2. 0. It contained detailed profiles of her parents, their personal histories, hobbies, personalities, common conversation topics, and a list of landmine subjects to avoid at all costs. The most insane part was the meticulously crafted persona for me. A humble beat cop from a blue-collar background, but driven, honest, and exceptionally competent. Deeply in love with Victoria, would marry no one else. My skin crawled as I read. This wasn't an agreement, it was a script. The Vance family lived in a gated community with intense security. In the living room, her mother, Eleanor, sat perfectly poised in a custom-tailored dress. Her expression as she looked me over was a cocktail of judgment and disdain. Her father, Richard, was more relaxed in a polo shirt, but the authoritative air of a retired deputy chief still clung to him. You must be Leo. Victoria tells us you're a patrolman. Eleanor began, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Yes, ma'am. Getting experience on the streets. It's such a difficult job, isn't it? And the pay isn't very high, I imagine. She took a delicate sip of her tea. I could feel my self-worth being ground into the expensive Persian rug. It's stable. Good benefits was all I could manage. Our Victoria has always been an overachiever. We expect her partner to be, at the very least, her equal in ambition and accomplishment. The message was crystal clear. You're not good enough for my daughter. I was speechless, reduced to an awkward, frozen smile. Victoria sat beside me, silent as a statue. Just when I thought I was about to suffocate, the doorbell rang. A man in a designer suit and gold-rimmed glasses walked in, carrying gift bags from a luxury brand. Eleanor, Richard, I just got back from Zurich. Brought you a little something. Preston Thorne. He was in the dossier. A young tech millionaire from an old money family. Eleanor's number one choice for a son-in-law. He saw me, paused for a beat, then smiled with dawning comprehension. And who is this? Leo Hayes. My boyfriend. Victoria finally said, her voice as stiff as if she were reading a suspect's rights. Preston pushed his glasses up his nose and extended a hand. Preston Thorne. A pleasure. Eleanor mentioned you were a police officer. Such a noble profession. Serving the community. His words were polite, but his eyes were full of dismissive pity. At dinner, he held court, pontificating on everything from international finance to AI, making my work sound like a child's game. Richard, you were a legend in the department, and now Victoria is following in your footsteps. Officer Hayes, working patrol, you probably can't even imagine the kind of pressure the homicide detectives are under, can you? With one casual sentence, he'd exiled me from their world. Richard's expression soured. Eleanor, however, looked pleased. Victoria's fist was clenched under the table. Just as Preston was launching into another monologue, I spoke up. Chief Vance, are you watching the new season of Blue Bloods? Richard blinked. How did you know? There's a faint nicotine stain on the inside of your index and middle fingers, but the house doesn't smell of smoke, which means you don't smoke inside. I saw the Netflix icon on your phone's home screen earlier, so I figured you're probably catching up on your tablet on the patio. The show is a huge hit with men your age, especially those with a background in law enforcement. I paused, then continued. But they got a detail wrong in the last episode. The audio recorder they used in the interrogation scene was decommissioned by most departments 3 years ago because of a data leak vulnerability. I elaborated, citing a few real-life cases I'd handled. Richard's eyes lit up. He clearly hadn't expected a simple beat cop to be so observant. Preston's face turned to stone. For the rest of the meal, Richard peppered me with questions, and we talked about everything from tactical gear to community policing, leaving Preston completely out of the conversation. On the drive home, silence. Just as we were pulling into the garage, Victoria spoke. "Thank you for today." Her voice was as flat as ever, but I heard something new underneath it. Preston Thorne wasn't the type to give up easily. He started pulling strings, digging into my background. It didn't take long for the trouble to find me. I was responding to a routine call, a dispute between neighbors. It was resolved, and I was about to leave. Suddenly, one of the men involved lunged at me, grabbing my uniform and screaming, "Police brutality!" He hit me. I immediately stepped back, creating distance. "Don't be ridiculous. I never touched you." "You did. You assaulted me. I'm in pain. I'm filing a complaint." He threw himself to the ground and started writhing. To make matters worse, I looked down and saw a smear of mud completely obscuring the lens of my body camera. And the security camera on the corner store across the street had, coincidentally, been on the fritz during that exact time frame. It was too perfect. I was suspended. My sergeant clapped a hand on my shoulder, his face grim. "Leo, I know this is bullshit, but he's got a witness, and our evidence is damaged." My hands are tied. I sat in the empty squad room, the uniform I had worn with pride for 4 years, feeling heavy and foreign. When I got home, Victoria was there. The anger I'd been suppressing all day erupted. "Are you happy now?" I slammed the suspension notice on the table. "Is this what you wanted? You used me as a shield, and now my entire life is ruined. Was it worth it? Just to get your mother off your back?" She watched me, her face unreadable. After a long, heavy silence, she picked up her car keys and walked out without a word. I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the empty room, a wave of despair washing over me. She was probably on her way to her mother's, ready to confess everything and cut me, the now useless pawn, loose. Fine. This whole insane charade needed to end anyway. I didn't sleep a wink. Early the next morning, my sergeant called, his voice electric. "Hayes, you're clear. Get your ass down to the precinct now." When I arrived, I got the full story. In the middle of the night, the man who had accused me walked into the station and withdrew his complaint. He confessed he'd been paid to frame me. He also gave up the person who hired him, Preston Thorne's personal assistant. I asked my sergeant what happened. He looked at me with a newfound respect. "Kid, I don't know how you did it, but you've got one hell of an angel watching over you." Captain Vance came through. She spent all night pulling every scrap of civilian surveillance footage from a 3-block radius of the incident. Paid a tech out of her own pocket to analyze it frame by frame. They found a clear shot of the whole thing reflected in a car's side view mirror. She took that evidence to the guy's house. He folded instantly, sang like a canary. She even called in a favor with her father, one he's been sitting on for years. "All for you. Pulled an all-nighter to clear your name." I stood there, a buzzing in my ears. She hadn't gone to abandon me. She had gone to fight for me. In the most direct, aggressive, and efficient way she knew how. Something inside my chest cracked. It was a painful, aching feeling, but it was also warm. Maybe she wasn't just using me. After that, things between us started to change. I took over the cooking and cleaning. That's when I discovered that the decorated, brilliant captain of homicide was a complete disaster at basic life skills. Her fridge contained nothing but bottled water, cold brew, and a few sad-looking lean cuisines. The first time I made a real dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the works, she just sat at the table, staring at the steaming plates with a strange expression. She looked like a child who had never been given a piece of candy before, a mix of curiosity and confusion. She ate slowly, but she cleaned every single plate. From that day on, I was the designated chef, and she was my only customer. One weekend, I caught a nasty cold while cleaning. By midnight, I was burning up with a fever. In a delirious haze, I felt a cool cloth on my forehead. I pried my eyes open to see Victoria sitting on the edge of my bed. She was in her pajamas, her hair a mess, her eyes filled with an anxiety I'd never seen on her before. Her movements as she tried to give me a sponge bath were clumsy, almost comically inept. I grabbed her hand to tell her I was fine. It was cold, and it trembled in my grasp. That's when I noticed the dark circles under her eyes. She'd been up all night again, this time watching over me. The Ice Queen. Knows how to take care of someone, huh? I rasped, my voice hoarse from the fever. Her face flushed a deep, immediate crimson. "Shut up," she muttered. My asset being sick would disrupt the plan. It was the same cold tone, but somehow it didn't sting anymore. After I recovered, I started trying to enter her world. When she was reviewing old case files, I'd pull up a chair and read over her shoulder. She never stopped me. Sometimes, when I looked confused, she would quietly explain the technical details. We were talking about something other than our arrangement. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The cold, empty apartment was starting to feel like a home, and the impenetrable fortress of ice around her heart seemed to be melting, one drop at a time. The peace didn't last. Preston Thorne, it seemed, was a glutton for punishment. I got dragged to a college reunion by an old friend. Halfway through the night, a female classmate I'd been friendly with started chatting with me. She was clearly drunk. As she was talking, she suddenly stumbled, falling directly into my arms that I instinctively reached out to steady her. At that exact moment, a shadow fell over us. I looked up. It was Victoria. She was standing not 10 feet away, concealed in the dim light. Her eyes were glacial. She didn't look at me. She walked straight toward the woman in my arms. She didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She simply leaned down and whispered something in the woman's ear. The color drained from the girl's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She ripped herself from my grasp and practically sprinted out of the bar. Victoria turned to me. The raw, possessive fury in her eyes sent a shiver down my spine. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. The moment we were inside, she slammed me against the wall. It was the first time I had ever seen her lose control. "No one touches you but me." Her voice was a low, guttural growl. And then she kissed me. It was a punishment, rough, desperate, and utterly without skill, as if she were trying to consume me. But in her wild eyes, I saw something else flicker for a moment. Pure, undiluted fear. And in that instant, my own fear vanished. I didn't push her away. I raised my hands and clumsily wrapped them around her, patting her back gently. She froze. The frantic, punishing kiss stopped. Her body went slack against mine. Finally, she buried her face in my shoulder, and I could feel her whole body shaking, like a wounded animal that had finally found a safe place to hide. After that night, a new, unspoken dependency formed between us. She started keeping tabs on me, waiting up in the living room if I worked late. Her excuse was always the same. "Can't have you getting killed in the line of duty." It would ruin the plan. One day while she was away at a conference, I went back into her study. This time, I had a mission. In the drawer where she kept her spare car keys, I found a small, ornate key. The key to the wooden box. When I opened it, my world tilted on its axis. There were no secret case files, no confidential documents. It was filled with things about me. A candid photo of me from the police academy, helping a girl who had dropped her books. The photo was yellowed at the edges. A copy of a precinct newsletter with a brief mention of my first commendation. My name was circled in red ink, a cheap pen that had run out of ink, one I vaguely remembered tossing in the trash at my desk. There's even a blurry, pixelated photo of me playing basketball in college, carefully laminated. At the very bottom of the box was a diary. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, but the pressure of the pen on the page spoke of immense restraint. Academy orientation. He was the class speaker. He said his dream was to be a good cop, to protect people. When he smiled, he looked like the sun. I almost fell in the library today. He caught me. His hand was so warm. I didn't dare look at him, but I know my ears were burning. He graduated, assigned to the 18th district. I put in a transfer request to CPD headquarters. I just wanted to be closer to him. He threw away a pen. I took it from the trash. I feel like a stalker, but I can't stop myself. My mother is pushing another blind date on me. I hate it. I just want to reach out and grab my son, even if it means getting burned. My hands were shaking as I turned the pages. It wasn't a setup. It was a hunt. From that day at the academy, I had been her target. All of her obsession, her control, her threats. It all stemmed from a secret, years-long crush she never knew how to express. I looked at the photo of me helping that random girl with her books, and I remembered a flash of a girl with a stony face but furiously red ears turning away from me. It had all been right there from the beginning. I put everything back in a box, locked it, and closed the study door. My heart was a mess of conflicting emotions. There was anger at being manipulated. But beneath it all, there was a profound sense of shock and a deep, aching sympathy for her. Rebuffed and humiliated, Preston Thorne went off the deep end. He targeted a case I was working, a series of burglaries. On Wednesday night, I received an anonymous tip. The caller said my key informant in the case had been kidnapped and was being held at an abandoned warehouse on the south side. They demanded I come alone. The voice was disguised, but I knew it was a trap. It was Preston. You call for backup. He dies. The voice snarled before hanging up. I knew it was a setup designed to corner me. But I had to go. An informant's life was on the line. I sent a text to Victoria. Rats in the warehouse. Plan B. It was a code we'd used in training exercises at the academy. It meant, my cover is blown. It's a trap. Send backup on my signal. I had no idea if she would remember it. It was my only hope. I drove to the warehouse. It was cavernous and empty, lit by a few dim, dangling bulbs. The moment I stepped into the center of the floor, steel shutters slammed down on all sides, plunging the space into near darkness. A dozen thugs holding lead pipes and baseball bats emerged from shadows. Preston stepped out from behind them, a twisted smile on his face. Officer Hayes, we meet again. Where is he? I asked, my voice cold. The informant? Oh, he's irrelevant, Preston said with a wave of his hand. What's important is settling our score. What right does a worthless beat cop have to take what's mine? I didn't waste words. I dropped into a fighting stance. I held my own for a while, but it was 12 against 1. A pipe slammed into my back, the pain searing. A steel-toed boot caught me in the ribs, and I went down. My arm screamed in protest as I hit the concrete. Preston picked up a lead pipe and walked toward me. Tell me, he sneered, if I break your legs today, do you think Victoria will still want to cripple? He raised the pipe high, aiming for my knee. I squeezed my eyes shut. Boom! The sound was deafening. The main warehouse door flew off its hinges, kicked open from the outside. Victoria stood silhouetted against the light, dressed in black tactical gear. The look in her eyes was pure murder. Victoria's gaze swept over me, cataloging my injuries. In that instant, her entire demeanor shifted. She became a predator. She moved. Her actions were brutally efficient, each strike aimed at a joint, a nerve cluster, a weak point. There was no flair, no wasted motion, just pure lethal force. The thugs who had seemed so menacing moments before went down like bowling pins. The warehouse filled with screams. Preston stared, horrified. He had never seen this side of her. You're insane. You're a goddamn lunatic, he shrieked, stumbling backward. Victoria kicked the pipe from his hand, closed the distance in a blur, and seized his arm, twisting it with expert precision. Crack! The sound of bones snapping echoed in the cavernous space. As Preston howled in agony, she planted a boot on his chest and pinned him to the floor. Touching him, she said, her voice colder than the grave, is 1,000 times worse than touching me. Just then, sirens wailed outside, and backup flooded the warehouse. The officers who rushed and stopped dead in their tracks, stunned by the scene. Victoria ignored them all. She strode over to me, took off her jacket, and draped it over my shoulders. Then, in front of 24 shocked colleagues, she bent down and scooped me up into her arms. Tori, I managed trying to squirm free. Don't move, she commanded, her voice strained. She carried me past the stunned faces of my fellow officers and toward the waiting ambulance. Inside, she gripped my hand, her knuckles white, her strength threatening to crush my bones. I saw her shoulders shaking. A single, hot drop of liquid landed on the back of my hand. A tear. She was crying. Leo, you're not allowed to be seriously hurt. That's an order, she choked out, her voice cracking, showing me a vulnerability I never thought possible. My injuries weren't that bad, mostly cuts and bruises that looked worse than they were. Lying in a hospital bed, I watched Victoria. She was trying to peel an apple for me, her movements so clumsy she was butchering it. I decided it was time. From the pocket of my jeans, I pulled out the creased, yellowed photo from the academy, the one I had taken from her box. You know, for a top detective. I said it softly. You were never very good at staying undercover. The knife in her hand froze. She looked up, her face pale, her eyes wide with the panic of a child whose most precious secret has just been discovered. Her first instinct was to bolt. She started to stand up. I grabbed her hand. Don't go. I looked her straight in the eye. Because the truth is, I've had a crush on you for just as long. Ever since you came back to the academy as a decorated detective to give a speech to our graduating class. She stared at me, her eyes filling with tears. I pulled her down to sit on the edge of the bed. So when you handcuffed me to your door, a part of me, under the terror, was thinking, what did I do to get so lucky? My dream girl is finally talking to me, even if it's to threaten my career. Victoria, I said, my voice gentle. You don't have to work so hard to chase the sun. All you ever had to do was turn around. I was right behind you the whole time. That's when the dam broke. She collapsed into my arms and sobbed. She cried like a child, letting out all the years of loneliness, of pressure, of repressed love she had carried all by herself. I held her tight, stroking her hair. I'm here, I whispered. Don't be afraid. Preston Thorne went away for a very long time. Assault, kidnapping, filing a false police report. They threw the book at him. The scandal nearly sank his family's company. Victoria's mother, Eleanor, showed up at the hospital with gift baskets overflowing with expensive fruit and gourmet snacks. She held my hand, called me a good boy, and fussed over me as if she was terrified I might get away. After I was discharged, Victoria became clingy. She was still a woman of few words, but her actions spoke volumes. She tried to learn how to cook for me by following a YouTube tutorial and nearly set the kitchen on fire. I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her soot-covered waist. From now on, I whispered in her ear, the kitchen is my jurisdiction. You're also my jurisdiction. Her ears turned a shade of red. I was becoming very fond of. We didn't have a big wedding, just a small ceremony at a chapel with our closest friends and colleagues. She wore a simple white dress, her face set in its usual stoic expression. But when the priest asked her to say her vows, her "I do" was a choked whisper. I lifted her veil and leaned in close. No threats necessary this time, Captain. Your marriage application has been officially approved. And there, in my arms, she finally gave me a smile that was pure, unadulterated sunlight. After the wedding, she was still the same badass captain of homicide. But everyone in the department knew her icy exterior was reserved for everyone but one person. One night, lying in bed, I asked her something that had been on my mind. In your diary, you wrote that you wanted to grab your son, even if it meant getting burned. What did you mean? She snuggled closer, her voice muffled against my chest. My family. It was cold. My father was married to his job, and my mother was married to her social status. I learned to be alone, to depend on no one. And then I met you. You were so warm, Leo. It scared me. I was afraid that if I got too close, I'd mess up your life. That my darkness would snuff out your light. So I used the only tools I had, force, intimidation. I tried to chain you to me. I was so afraid that if I ever loosened my grip, you'd run. I tightened my arms around her, kissing the top of her head. You're a brilliant detective, Tori, but you're a real dummy sometimes. I'm not the son. I'm just your guy. And I'm not going anywhere.